Hi everyone, welcome to another weird stream. And hey, Magbluff, great seeing you here. And well, let me start a bit differently than I do normally. So, Magbluff, happiest of the birthday to you. Happy birthday! You're celebrating your very special birthday today. So, all the best to you, you talented person. Keep on coming. Those wonderful sketches, artworks that you produce, and keep on being a happy person. I guess as long as you're happy and healthy, things fall into right places. So all the best to you. And uh, having said that, welcome everyone. Yeah, you're very welcome. This is the miniature that I was painting last week, happening to be doing two streams in a row due to the fact that I was out for most of the month. So now I'm catching up with my second stream. So this is Lord Gale Holt. I just uploaded better pictures on my Instagram, but this is the alternative Hoffman. I painted roughly 85 to 90% of the miniature over the last stream. So what I did, I cleaned up a little bit the cloak. I did some more brushwork on the lion's mane. That added the green flames and just tweaked a few things. Added some static grass at the base. And one thing worth noting, just to spend a bit of time on discussing this model before I move to today's work. Thank you. Glad you like it. Let's just wait for it to catch focus. There it is. So the lion's head and the mane, while generally dry brush is nothing wrong with that technique, I feel like for when you have a massive part of miniature, yeah, that is quite red. When you have a massive part of model that's just hair or mane or fur, dry brush is just not going to do the trick because it will just be the same bright color visible over and over, while the darker ones will become more muted. And that can work in some cases, but just to make it look more professional, I would say more realistic, I strongly suggest just switching to standard brushwork, filling in the most recessed areas with more muted, darker colors, and then doing the same on the raised ones. So this is the rad red Lord Galehold. Absolutely phenomenal miniature. I think that the ornament on the shield is the only one that looks kind of steampunky. But other than that, it's different aesthetics. I mean, it's still weird miniatures. It's still Malifaux where anything can happen, but this looks more like dark fantasy. So it was great to have an opportunity to work on something slightly different than regular Malifaux stuff. So wonderful miniature and really cool model. Uh, but tonight or today, depending on where you are, I'll be working on the Galvanic Worm, which is a true monster of a miniature. It's really big. It's the alternative Peacekeeper from Legend Reforged box that was released at Gen Con, and it's a nightmare version of a massive robot. So again, a very unusual approach to designing alternative models. Doesn't have much to do with robot equipped with harpoon gun, a terrifying robot. I think, or it used to be terrifying. I think it's not no longer terrifying. And I will be following roughly the artwork, so I will need to switch between windows every now and then just to have a look. So the metallic pieces are going to be old beaten metal, and the rest, the underbelly, bright, pale, whitish, maybe with a hint of purple, and the upper body will be pale purple, so not much red to it. I may do the armor red actually, like I did on the Lord Galehold. Just need to give it some thought. Actually, I could do those more obscured metallic parts that are hidden deep down in the body of the dragon with standard metallics and those with red, just to tie it with the guild aesthetics. So that's the rough plan. And if you've seen any of my streams before, you know that I just have a very, very general plan, which can evolve as I work on the model. So first of all, I will base it. So I will just use some Basilic Cannon Gray to put on the base so that it doesn't look like it's floating in nothingness. Will give me some foundation to build from. And that's the start. It's actually, I need to adjust the height of my desk just to look over the camera on the model, because otherwise I will block my view and your view, which is even worse. So very generous glaze or wash of Basilicanum Gray, which is a really, really good color for the kind of base I have, which is part rock, part earth. Then I tweak it with some other contrast paints like browns, greens, and give it a quick dry brush of pale white. And that's it. Not much is needed, and it looks realistic, looks nice. So nice and easy method. I just don't see the point of doing different numerous layers, glazes, when I can get something looking really, really decent without that much effort. And I sculpted the base. It's made from milliput. By sculpted, maybe that's too much of a word to say that I sculpted it, because I just basically put some modeling putty on the base, molded it into, or kneaded it into the shape so that it matched the position of the worm, just to give it some extra elevation. I thought it would look more interesting, more dynamic if it was slightly raised. I generally think that elevated bases add a little bit of dynamism to the models. Now just filling in all those parts that are not that easy to access. There will be some static grass, so just being very generous with the application of Basilicanum Gray at this point, because that's not the focal area of this model. Well, what we've been up to? Not that much painting, actually. I just put some finishing touches on Lord Galehold. I took part in a tournament, Malifaux tournament, of course, on Saturday. Didn't do that well. Won one game and lost two. I may do a recap later on, but had fun. Finally put Titania 2 on the board, and that was a good experience. I lost that game, but that was a game against probably the best player we have, or one of the best players we have. So didn't really expect to get much out of that game. So I thought I might as well experiment, and also it was against titled version of Hamelin, whom I had never faced. I never faced any version of Hamelin in the third edition. So I thought I either stick to something I know very well and try to eke out anything, or just experiment. And I experimented. I even managed to score 4 points, which was less than my opponent scored. Well, fewer points. He scored 7. But all things considered, I wasn't unhappy with the result, because my previous game against this guy, his nickname is Trick. You might have seen some of the games that he's played in various Vassal tournaments. In my previous game against him, I lost 8-0. So I would call it a major improvement overall. So maybe not a good result, but could have been much, much worse. And Titania 2 felt really interesting because I used models that I had never really put on the table before in the third edition. And yeah, I did. I had a lot of fun. It was super fun. Well, I always have fun at tournaments. I mean, I never have. I mean, the guys that I play against are really laid back, and no one really pushes it too much. So there isn't really this win at all cost attitude present there. And the fact that I played Titania 2 meant that I, for the first time, was able to put Autumn Knights and Wallgeist on the table. And Autumn Knights are really good with the champion upgrade. Without it, they just seem like soulstones that could have been used much more effectively somewhere else. But with the champion upgrade, they work really well. I just needed to fix the lead of that contrast paint and almost managed to spill it. That wouldn't be fun. So there's the base color on the base. I guess I'll work on the body now. And I will have a quick look at the artwork. So this is a really pale shade of white with a hint of blue and green. It's actually kind of multicolored. So I will start with very light purple on the whole body, not the mechanical part. And from there, I will move to keeping the purple, purple and white. So that's roughly the plan. And I'm just looking at which color might be most suitable for that. And I'm thinking some light color that could be tweaked easily. And for that, I will use Magus Purple. I will just give it a good shake to make sure all the pigment is well distributed in the pot. Just finishing my little cup of coffee. It's quite late here. I mean, 9 p.m. Not very late, but it's been a long day, quite busy day. So I think a bit of coffee and a lot of water to go with it will keep me going. So I will start with that. Actually, no, that will be a good start, I think. Then I can tweak the underbelly with a hint of blue, perhaps. But before I actually apply it, I will thin it down slightly. And I have a lot of those spur faces. I don't use most of them because I typically use some kind of resin base or make my own, but I have plenty of them lying around. And I will use a really big brush. So by big brush, I mean one that holds a lot of paint. So something like that. So you can see it's pretty large. And what I will do is I will just grab Lamy medium, which is perfect medium. It's a perfect medium for keeping the paint thinned down. Maybe I will even grab a larger brush as my mixing pot. So what it does is thins the paint down very well, but it doesn't break apart the consistency, which happens with water. So if I applied water and if I applied contrast paint to water, or the other way around, water to contrast paint, it would have negative effect on the consistency, and I don't want that. So that's more lemon medium than paint at this stage. I'll just mix it well, test it on a piece of paper. It's got, maybe I can even go thinner than that. really thinning it down because I want this pale underbelly after the first glaze, or rather wash. It's too thick to be a wash. So moving on to the miniature. We should get focused in a second. But before then, I will just start applying it. And it's got this nice pale look. And I'm already considering the overall composition because this will be used as foundation for highlights on the main body as well. There is the focus, perfect. So as you can see, really pale underbelly at this stage. And I'm being very generous, applying it over the whole model. And it's a really big one. And I think I will also use oil paints on this one, just for some extra depth or extra bit of highlight. Now, some areas will be harder to get to. Because it looks like the dragon it's kind of like a mechanical dragon snake, which looks like it's a bit makes me think of those traditional Chinese dragons in the parades that float in the air, but it still has this mechanical part to it that holds it in the ground or closer to the ground. So I'm at this stage I'm not very meticulous, just want to make sure I get an even layer of light purple over the whole miniature. Because once I have a thin layer which doesn't impact it too much, I can start working on adjusting it. So keeping it darker or brighter. Not really sure which way I'll go at this point. So stick around if you want to find out where I go with it, or pop in and out to check out the progress. So once I go through that, I will use the app, the Malifaux app, to have a look at the strategies that were there for all the games and do a quick recap. I played Neverborn, Zoraida, the old version, the first version, the OG version in Game 1, Titania 2 in Game 2, and Zoraida 1 in Game 3. And just some spoilers, I won the first game decisively. It was like 7-3, I believe. Then I lost the second one 4-7. Once again, that was a tough game against a very, very tough competitive opponent. I mean, a laid back guy, but a really, really experienced player. And almost got a draw in my third game, but ended up losing it 5-6. But that was a really, really close game. Could have gone either way. And that part, I believe, is also purple, as it's supposed to be part of this either body or something that pretends to be body. Hey, defective dice, hi there. Good seeing you. So in case you missed, that's the miniature from previous stream, Lord Gale Holt. in all of his glory. Looks like a really badass model. And today is the Galvanic Worm day. So since we have one of the amazing Malifaux content creators, make sure to check out his channel, Defective Dice, best source of knowledge about Malifaux lore. And check out the Discord as well. Again, discussions that can go different ways, can be extremely interesting and in depth, or can be just fun to follow. Thank you. Thank you. Glad you like it. So for now, that's just the base color of the whole model. I will just clean the brush. And something that, by now I consider it indispensable. Let me just bring it to this. Yeah, that's the link to the Defective Dice channel. So that's the brush rinser. Great, great tool. So essentially what you do is just rinse the brush here, it opens up, and the dirty water flows inside, and you have a perfectly clean brush, which is extremely helpful, especially if you work with large brushes that can get dirty easily. So that's the pale dragon for now. And I think I will speed it up a little bit with hair dryer. Just make sure I get it. And because otherwise it would just take too long. But that's an easy quick start. I mean, I've done my research. I mean, there are discussions about lore, different podcasts, but this is one. This is a channel that is just dedicated to Malifaux lore. And since we have you, let's pick your brains a little bit. So, are you working on a new lore video, or would you care to give a kind of a hint, maybe, of who is that going to be about? That would be cool to know. I think the last one was about Ophelia, I believe, as far as I remember. It's amazing how that character evolved from being a kind of parody of Ortega's, developing into influential gremlin powerhouse. So now I'm just going around the model, making sure there aren't any areas that I left out. There are some white areas on the base, but that's not a problem. I can address that later on. I don't want the paint to pool too much. I want more to stay in the recessed areas, but I don't want too much in the recessed areas at the same time, like under the arm here. It's just too much, and I wouldn't be able to modify it if it dried. That's better. So I'm using a smaller brush because otherwise the details become less clear, and it's really tough to work on them. Oh, you should be working on. Well, then I'm sorry for breaking your concentration, but good to know that you're already working on something new. And it is a really lovely dragon. Let me just get the hair dryer. because without it, it would just take too long for it to dry. And I need to speed it up. So apologies ahead of time. There will be some noise. So I'll just go with it. And the nice thing about contrast paints, well, one of the nice things, still haven't finished the last art prop you sent me. Okay. The good thing about contrast paint is that they become really matte when they dry, so that they lose the shine. And now I'm ready to continue working on it. As you can see, let's just pause here for a second to appreciate the wonderful texture on the upper body. And I was removing the mold lines from the that are there from the casting process, or rather injection process, are barely there. So you see it already looks good, very good, just after one quick wash. But of course I'm not stopping here. I'm going to take it much further. But I got the result that I wanted just to get started. The pale underbelly that matches somehow the purple upper body. And now let's tweak it. Let's have some tweaks, and I will start with, now I'm hesitating. I can actually go with this color, with Luxian Purple. It's one of the new contrast paints. I think it's going to, all right. I think it's going to be purple. Yeah, more or less like the artwork. May do some tweaks. I'm still thinking whether to paint those metal plates red from the top. Sorry, there's some strange noise. My daughter woke up, but fortunately the wife is there. All right, all good. Keep on lurking, of course. So giving it a good shake. Grabbing a larger brush, but not a huge brush, because I want to apply it slowly. So now it's starting to get more into the purple area. Seems like my younger daughter woke up and is pretty unhappy about life in general. But no worries, she's not alone. Seems like the vaccination she got today, which is, well, one of the standard ones kids get as they grow up, left her arm sore and it's bothering her, but that's just part of the process. She will be fine tomorrow. So what I'm doing is I'm starting with the edges, just to define the area that I will be working on. I don't want to rush it because I don't want to apply too much, just to have good control. I already know that that's the color that I like, and I'll be using it. Maybe even keeping it a bit darker, so just outlining the whole area. And that way I already have some kind of reference of how the color of the scales of the lower of the upper part goes with the color on the lower part. And I can still use some thin glazes where those two meet, just to have a more of a gradient when it transitions from one color to another. Watercolor sketch of the hodgepodge. All right. Nice. It's artists motivating artists to work. I really like the last artwork by McBluff, which showed Professor McMorning descending into madness. It quite well captured well the feeling that there might be still some humanity left in him that's quickly going away. Really good work. So that's part of it outlined. Now this flopping part that looks like it tore off. Yeah, you should definitely give McBluff a follow on Instagram. Let me just look up the name that McBluff uses on Instagram. I think I should get it. It's just McBluff. Yes, McBluff. If you look up the Instagram ID, it's McBluff MCK MCK Bluff MCK Bluff. Just double checking I wrote it correctly. So, in those of you who are not familiar, check it out. Really good stuff. Not all of that is Malifaux related, but there are some really nice ones, like Lucius getting his portrait done. I think there is this theme of madness, magic, and the style that evolves. And it's always great to see people using Malifaux as springboard for their artistic creations. Not necessarily miniature painting. There are a lot of different things you can do. Okie dokie. Just taking a bit more time here. One thing I always do at this point is make sure I turn the model upside down every now and then. And for the head, actually, I will again give it a good shake. And I will thin it down a little bit because it's quite heavy. I would like it to be less impactful. And that's why I will just thin it down very slightly with some Lamian medium. using one of the spare 40mm bases I have, which holds just enough paint to allow me to work comfortably. So this is like filling in sketch with colors, because the sketch is just a base coated model assembled and base coated, and this one was actually quite easy to assemble. I don't think I even used reference for it. Didn't feel necessary. Just assembled the sections of the body and then put them together. I was just looking at the artwork as I was building the model. So not the most complex model to build, fortunately, but which says a lot of good things about the design team, because not only it's a great model, but it's designed in a way that is hobbyist friendly. Now the face. At this point, all I do is just give it a little bit extra definition. The tongue will be red later on. So maybe since the tongue will be red and I want to keep the mouth area a bit more vibrant, I will not use red on the armor and just focus on red on the eyes and around the mouth area. But I may change my mind. I'll just see where the paint takes me, where the process takes me. So again, some upside down action. That's another good thing about contrast paints is that you can thin them down and then tweak the impact they have when applied to the base coat. So you don't always want them to hit the miniature heavy. Maybe with the arms I will go for a bit of a heavier color. And the right arm, just trying to avoid the underbelly because it's got already this nice pale color that will be tweaked into white and then maybe slight touches of blue. Because when I work on models that are larger, that have larger parts or body visible, either flesh or scales or underbelly or whatever it is, I try to consider already colors that I can use to modify it. So not necessarily just focusing on different saturation of purple or intensity of the color, rather you thinking about colors that could be accompanying it. And that's already a decent shade of purple. Cleaning my brush. And it's a large model, so hard to really show the whole model. And it's already going somewhere. Now, apologies in advance for some noise. I will again use the hair dryer to speed up the drying process. There we go. It's dry now. Well, almost perfectly dry. And I can continue applying different washes and glazes. It's so nicely textured. I think I'll now go with a bit of magenta. And I'm fine putting it on the same base that I used before, so that the colors mix up a little bit. Nothing wrong with it. And this will give it some extra punch, because it's magenta kind of brings together the previous layers nicely and adds a bit more vibrancy to the whole thing. And I can use, actually I will use magenta on the face and the upper area, and I will maybe thin it down very much to work a little bit on the underbelly. But for now it's just adding the extra saturation, and it works well with the colder shade of purple that I used before, because it kind of absorbs it and adds additional depth there. Works fine. Some of it got on the underbelly where I don't want it necessarily, so I will just, it's easy to remove it when you have a clean brush that you can just dampen and quickly move around, move the paint away. Oh, hey there, Doug. I was just saying earlier that I played in a tournament over the weekend on Saturday, and I put Titania 2, the Autumn Queen, on the table for the first time ever. And it was fun. It was fun. I actually played, it was the second game of the tournament. I won the first one and lost the second and the third one. But the second one, in which I used Titania, the Autumn Queen, was against probably the top or one of the top players we have. And he was running Hamelin too. And I used pretty much, I think, this list that you were talking about in the podcast with two Wall Guys, two Autumn Knights, Rex, and Titania. And it was fun. I even managed to bring back Rex to the game, the Dino to the game, top decking the flip. So flipping 13 of the top just to bring him back the moment after he got killed. And what I liked a lot is the fact that I put miniatures on the table that I never put before in the third edition. The Autumn Knights are pretty awesome. Really tough to put down with the champion upgrade. And my opponent was well prepared for it. He's a very, very, very seasoned player. So he didn't use close combat while finding them, which of course worked in his favor. And I had some good flips on coordinated attack trigger, and there was hidden martyrs in the pool, and he had hidden martyrs on one of the winged plagues, which I of course killed, and the other on Nyx, which I of course didn't kill because Nyx is really, really tough to put down, especially when you protect him well. And he has this cruel disappointment. He heals when you fail duels, and it's just such a massive effort. I brought Nyx to 1 wound, and then he was back to full in his next activation. So definitely a very good choice for a second hidden martyr because it takes a lot of effort to put him down. And what also I liked a lot is the use of underbrush markers. I mean, I put at one point I had several of them on the table, like 10 plus, and of course there was load them up in the pool. So the my opponent had this Freikorps specialist or whatever the name is, the guy with flamethrower who can remove them. And the first turn he was removing them, but the second turn he just gave up on that because I was producing them everywhere. And I knew that that model immediately became priority target. Yeah. Wait, over the rest. Actually, I there was like this large card in the middle of the board, which thankfully blocked Hamelin for the most part. So he was more rather focused on facilitating his own crew rather than messing up with mine. And I put Rex very early on deep into the combat because I wanted to bring down that model that could remove a lot of markers. And I landed a few hits, but he healed him, so that wasn't very well. That didn't work very well, and I think that's when the game really was decided, which was like top of turn 2, where I charged my Rex, failed to kill the model despite having 3 attacks because I had, or maybe 2 attacks because I couldn't charge the first turn. I needed to walk around some terrain, and then he was just keeping the specialist or the Flammenwaffe, however I just don't recall the name. Yeah, that's that. You see, I just never really faced that team before, and I clearly saw that any model that is a henchman uh, and has well damage reduction built in, the incorporeal really helps. So I knew that that was going to be tough. But I tried. I think Titania 1 would actually be quite better suited to put down Nyx because of the fact that she can ping with those markers twice, so that's already 2 damage. And then land 2 or 3 attacks, which can be impactful. I red jokered 1 attack. Oh, you took Nyx turn 2. Oh wow, nice. Yeah, the using the champions as arc nodes for attacks is quite effective way of approaching that. And actually, I really like the fact that Titania just chills in the back, stays surrounded by markers, and just facilitates everything. And everything moves at the beginning of her activation, which is also quite cool. So yeah, definitely will play her again. Definitely enjoy that. Could be a bit heavier against shooty crews because yes, underbrush markers are concealing, but then a focused shot is still a focused shot, and the damage track on guns typically spikes up quite high. All right, so once again, a fair warning, cover your ears, some noise incoming. Emissary is great in Titania. Its range attack puts enemies in negative flips. Yeah, yeah, of course. The built-in crowd trigger on half of your crew helps a lot. Oh yeah, it can be a bad time. You know what? Just it was my first game with Titania, and I'm just tapping into the potential that she has. But definitely the podcast with Dag with from Rage Quit Wire helped a lot because it gave me some insights that I would just try to discover myself by myself in my first game. But that way, I was just better prepared to use her. I think that even Aislinn might have a play in that crew. I put her only once on the table early into the second edition and never really brought her to tournaments again. But then her having the built-in crow when there are plenty of those markers and having a minimum 3 ranged attack with blasts that are built in even on weak damage, nothing to nothing to sneeze at. It's pretty solid, and she with a trigger she can drop a marker, which can just help you score a point or two. Well, it did for sure. So there is the some color, super glossy at this point, but then it will change after getting the matte base coat. Oh, and that this is the finished model that I was working on last week. Super cool, really badass model. But it's back to the worm now. So now I will further tweak the purple on the upper body. Just add some shade. And for that I will use darker shade of purple. So darker, maybe this one will do. Yeah, really, really cool model. Sakura purple it is. Giving it a good shake. So approaching the first hour of the stream, and so far some steady progress. Not rushing for it for sure. So speaking about the tournament, let me do a quick recap. I will just open the app and look at what was in the pool because my memory is like a sieve. I just don't remember everything. So the first one was carve a path, which is a very very nice strategy because it's it's you just have to do a lot of interactions or remove models that interact. And the pool was super schemy. So there was set the trap, sabotage, breakthrough, spread them out, and public demonstration. And I was facing a guy who started by saying that he's a very new player, new to the game, and he was running Dreamer 1, and I'm quite familiar with Dreamer 1, and I was running Zoraida 1, because she can just she multiply those interactions easily. Although Zoraida 2 would also be a reasonable option here. And I had a crew with 2 Silurids, the first mate, of course, and also what else did I have there? Hooded, Hooded Rider, because Hooded Rider can be a beater, can be a schemer. He can place 2 scheme markers for some strategies easily. And my opponent was running, well, pretty standard Dreamer crew with Lady Yume, some Alps, some Insidious Madnesses, Dreamer 2 in general. So now as I'm talking, I'm just bringing the darker shade of purple into some areas. And every now and then taking a peek at the artwork, which is really nice. And the game, I was pretty much in control of the game most of the time. I was able to kill Lady Yume quickly with Lord Chompy, using him against her, and took Sabotage, scored turn 2. Actually, I think I revealed both Sabotage and Public Demo. No, Sabotage and Breakthrough, because it was flank deployment, so there is plenty of space to drop those markers, especially when you have Hooded Rider and the First Mate, who can just put plenty of those markers easily. And my models were both pushing my markers, my Carve the Path markers up and bringing his back. And I think already told me at the beginning that they are new to the game. I do not really force a situation where I max out on the strategy and minimize their costs. And having said that, despite having just a few games under his belt, my opponent was playing a really solid game. And we played 4 turns, I believe. And close to the end of the game, we just talked through all possible scenarios and decided that 7-3 or 7-4, I can't remember right now. But either way, we agreed that yes, that's the most likely outcome of the game, and we decided to go with it. And then the second game was against a very good opponent, one of the best players we have. So I knew that I was skill-wise, I was outmatched. But I just thought that, yeah, let's just use this opportunity to put Titania too. And the fun fact about the tournament was that we were given schemes just like an hour before the tournament. So there was no time to prepare for it. And I was just hoping to get some schemes that would be somewhat favorable towards picking Titania too. And that seemed like a good choice because there was covert operation. So that's the one where you have markers and you need to have 3 models that you nominate at the beginning of the turn. And if they are unengaged, then one of them can claim one of those markers. So it's a bit like Turf War, only the models have to be unengaged. And the schemes were breakthrough again, load them up, assassinate, leave your mark, hidden martyrs with covert operation and standard deployment. Oh yeah, I have a worm, a big worm even. Not even a worm, but a worm. Yeah, it is a worm for sure. And I've already pretty much told everything that was to tell about this game. There were plenty of rats, of course, plenty of models with blight condition, nasty condition to put. And it's, I guess, against Hamelin. I, when I look back at that game, I don't think you can really avoid having blight on your models when you face Hamelin, because he just spreads it easily. And then there are models who just apparently weak models who just destroy your models when they have blight on them. So absolutely, that was a good pick against Titania. We played all 5 turns, and I didn't score my second point from load them up, which is a bit of a bummer. But actually, let me look at the game. I should have the strategy somewhere in the somewhere in the app. Yeah, I think I have it. The model that really bothered me was not Benny. Nyx was annoying. Hodgepodge is always annoying. Dragon Trooper. Dragon Trooper. That's the model that caused the biggest problem. Yeah, true. So Dragon Trooper, I wasn't able to kill it turn one and two. Well, turn two I started, but never got to completely killing it. So my opponent smartly kept him in the back, and he can remove markers from such a big distance that I just wasn't able to put Titania in a position where she would be safe and with three markers around her. And I had Hidden Martyrs on one of the Autumn Knights and one of the Vault Geists. Both got killed, fortunately for me, on different turns, so at least I got 1 point and 2 points from the strategy that I played for the first time. So overall, didn't feel bad about losing that game and felt that there is plenty of potential with Titania, the Autumn Queen. So my third tournament game was Cursed Objects, which is the killy strategy, and in hindsight, I should have just gone with Titania 1 because she's the most killy slash tanky model that Neverborn have at their disposal, I think. But I didn't, and I regretted it later on because I think the she's typically a great choice into cursed objects, and corner deployment doesn't bother her that much because she has ways of moving up the board and moving her models up the board quickly. Oh, I was out for a while. Hopefully I'm back. I hope I'm back. And yeah, Titania 2, I think she could still work well. I was facing a guy with whom I played a number of games, and they were always very competitive and very close. And that game was very close too because I lost 5-6. I chose the radio one, and he chose Rasputina. And when I saw that he picked Rasputina, I immediately took one Gurion just as a counterattack to have option to remove those markers because I expected to be flooded with markers, which didn't really happen. And that choice of putting a Gurion instead of, let's say, a Kurgan, I think it might have cost me the game because the Gurion didn't really do much apart from removing one or two ice pillar markers. Because the other strategies were set the trap, leave your mark, catch and release, secret meetup, and hidden martyrs. And I was able to score 2 from catch and release, 2 from cursed objects, and I think 1 from hidden martyrs. And that made it 5. And I just wasn't able to kill enough of my opponent's models in time to score from cursed objects. So after game 2, I knew that game 3 meant that I would either be upper half or lower half. So I ended up, I think, 7th out of 12. And here Titania 2 in that pool, yeah, could be. I mean, again, Hidden Martyrs, good pick for her because it's such an effort to remove 2 champions, and you can put a champion on Wildgeist. Catch and release makes sense. Leave your mark makes sense. And Aislinn actually could be a good choice here because she can even hit your own model, and stone or cheat low tome for the trigger that drops a scheme marker. So yeah, could be a better choice. I just, felt that in game 3 my brain was running at a, let's say, 50% capacity, and I wanted to go with something that I'm very familiar with. So now I'm just taking a peek at the artwork and using Shaish Purple, which is this super dark contrast color, and just adding it to some areas that I want much darker, like around those spikes on the back. Then I will move on to painting the face. I'm not really in a hurry. I might finish this model in the stream. Maybe I won't. Not rushing it for sure. But yeah, I definitely want to play Titania 2 more. I enjoyed her, and I'm already thinking that maybe even Killjoy would be playable in Titania 2, which is a model that I never even considered for any pull or strategy with any with any Neverborn Master. But with Titania 2 and the upgrade, because there will be some cheaper minions on the table that are bound to, well, die at some point of the game, and then he can pop out. So, and then there are ways of pushing him up the board with Malisaurus. So might be a consideration. And I have a nicely converted Killjoy which has like this massive animal skull instead of his standard face. I used to have the Silent Knight, and I painted it. It's a cool model, but I just liked my converted Killjoy more. But it's always when you play a new master or a new version of a master, it's exciting because it feels like you play a new game. You think you know the game very well, but you're forced to think completely differently about approaching, scoring, strategizing. You just cannot do things the way you operate other masters that you're familiar with. And it's cool because it's, as I said, it's just exciting and fun. So now I'm outlining the area where the upper part of the skin finishes and changes into this mechanical part, and using dark shyish purple contrast paint for that. I think there are still some like holes that need to be filled in. Maybe also on the side here. And I still wanted to kind of define those spikes protruding from the back with a bit of darker purple shade around them. But what I'm already getting is this kind of multicolored purple. It's not just one shade of purple because I've given it a few glazes of different shades. So it's going to look much richer in the end. And glazes and washes are a great way of achieving really nice effects when you have good texture on the model. And this one has just phenomenal texture. You can tell just even looking at the screen that there are plenty of those tiny scales on the back, and the glaze just naturally flows into the recessed areas. so that the raised ones just look great. But I would, well, just to maybe challenge a bit what Dag wrote, that I would really hesitate if I was to put Titania into Carve the Path, because the marker can just run through the underbrush markers, the strategy marker, and without those underbrush markers, the crew loses a lot of its effectiveness. So I would hesitate. It would just maybe require a bit more aggressive play, or just making sure that you target those strategy markers early on. But then, even though the Fey crew is much faster, arguably much faster with Titania 2, you still don't have models that can leap into action early on. Oh, it's getting warm in here. Yes, it is. For sure it is. I can already move to the face, I think, at this point. I will still put some highlights on the body because it became a bit too dark. But we're not even at the half of the stream, so let's pause for a second and take a look at what's been achieved so far. And the lighting isn't the most favorable one, but you should be able to see that it's not just pure purple. There are at least 3 shades of purple visible, which means that it's time to work a bit more on the face now. And I will start by putting some red in there. Or maybe even before I put red, I will just fill in the mouth with dark purple. Oh, and speaking of cool stuff, uh, today as I was kind of setting things up for the stream, and my kids were just doing some painting and staying quiet. I was listening and I was fixing them a quick supper. I was listening to a new video released by the Danger Planet, where they actually interviewed one of our guys. They had an interview with Hunted. So quite insightful video about painting techniques, brushes. I mean, if you've watched any of his streams, and I'm sure some of you have, because those are very good, then you probably know a lot of this stuff. But it's a nice overview of his approach to painting, his approach to hobby, tools that he uses, brushes, paints that he likes. So give it a listen. Good stuff. It's about 30 minutes long and really good stuff. Oh yeah, that's the link. Thank you. You killed Helix in turn 2 in game before last and the same to Vixen. Oh wow. Nice. Killing Helix. So in order to get early you would need to just have the knights up and running, or have the champion up and running, so that she has some kind of, let's say, arc node for her attacks, and then put stun. And if the opponent doesn't have way to remove stun, then the effectiveness of Master is severely reduced. Think about putting stun on a summoner that doesn't expect it turn 1 and needs suits for the summons. That could be a bummer. Oh yeah, that was also a very good interview about the devs and their approach to creating Gaming Grounds 3. Very insightful, and some really interesting comments. So give it a listen as well. And I think I will pick now that I have the mouth dark, I'll start working on the eyes. And no, before I start working on the eyes, I will still work a bit on the main body. So I will switch to color, which has one of my favorite names of paints. It's called Murderous Magenta. Hey, Haunted. Hey there. Oh, your ears were burning. Yes, I was just talking about you and the interview that you had at Danger Planet. Good stuff. Just listened to it earlier today. Nice overview of your approach to painting process, to tools that you use. Fun stuff. Yeah, it sounded like it was fun for you. I mean, some of it was I knew a lot of the answers that you gave them already because I followed quite a few of your streams. So I've seen the tools in action. I didn't know you have like what, 7 airbrushes? Now that's some dedication. I can respect that. I never really got too friendly with airbrush, but I'm not counting it out. I will probably give it another go at some point. 8 now. You just bought another. Wow. Well, if you use them a lot, you need them a lot. That's the way I see it. So now I'm using this Murderous Magenta to again bring some of the highlights together. I should get more shades of pink. And purple. But 8 airbrushes, that's quite a lot. I would probably be able to achieve even better effect than what I have with the gradual transition of colors on the model in half the time that I needed with standard brush on approach. But whenever I use the airbrush, I just don't have the sense of control. I just need more practice with it. And then you need perfect pressure and consistency, and when you have it imperfect, things become messy too easily. And it was bothering me because I never seemed to get those right. Pink and purple, those are tricky colors. But I think magenta is a good in-between color. And I actually have what? Let's actually give a bit of purple here. I will use AK purple. It's a bit different shade to what I had. Because I want to mix a few different shades on this model, just so that it looks kind of rich. Rich saturated look is what I'm going for, with different shades of purple and pink mixed together on the same model. Then I'll give it another glaze of magenta. And now I can even go more extreme than that and can use some fluorescent rose, but I will mix it with magenta. So it won't be that impactful. Now the paint clogged a bit. Now it's back. Ooh, let me just put some of it on the sheet of paper. That's the color that I will be using, but I will tone it down slightly with magenta glaze, and then mix them together and put some highlights. So getting it brighter in the midsection while keeping the lower section darker. So now I'm just waiting for my, because, well, it's not mine, we placed a bigger order within our gaming group together during Gen Con, and it's still, last week it was still on the US side, so getting here, but very slowly. And I have Euripides too waiting there, and this is a master that I will be using a lot, I'm sure, in the cursed object strategy. Yeah, all purples are good purples, all the Neverborn purples especially, because cursed objects is a strategy where if you have a shooty crew that can just chill out from the back and bombard opponents with heavy attacks from the distance, seems like a solid strategy to me, because opponents will want to come close, and as they come they will inevitably get hit multiple times and suffer some losses, hopefully. So that's the plan for Euripides, and it's such a cool model. Yes, I have Warlord Purple. I have it. Somewhere below, it's quite dark. I like it, but I'm just not feeling like using it today. Today I'm feeling like using more glazes and washes. Yeah, and Hex Light, that's a very good color. Yes, for sure. So now I'm just adding some final touches, but I can still tweak them later on. Then also here, so the nose area around the nostrils will be even brighter. I will even add some white there. So just lightly tapping it. It's using highlighting using a stippling-like technique, I guess, where you don't just land precise brush strokes, rather than you just tap the model with a brighter shade, and the brush is pretty damp, and as a result the paint kind of blends in with the previous layer and still maintains some of the texture and adds to that. So over here, for example, I feel like reinforcing the highlights, and I'm using super bright pink. It's just not that visible on the surface that had already been slightly highlighted. I forgot to plug the fan to my laptop because it heats up considerably. Even though the heat wave is gone, it feels almost like autumn here. So summer is just feels like a distant memory now, because it got much cooler. I mean, it's not still warm, but compared to the heat we had last week and the week before, feels like autumn. And actually, that's stippling technique. I think I might even use the foam and just grab pincers. And what I will do is I will just grab a piece of foam and just dip it into the bright pink, the very bright pink. Maybe tone it down slightly, and then I will just tap it on the side of the model where I want some extra color to show. And then I will give it all a quick glaze of magenta. That would work quite efficiently actually with an airbrush. So those are apparently some random splotches of paint, but thanks to the fact that I've built up to this much brighter shade, they kind of look pretty cool. They go well with the texture that's already on the model, and the texture is just wonderful. You can see all those tiny scales nicely lining up. Just I want to avoid touching it too hard so that it just affects the raised area, not the whole thing. So yeah, hobby cheating for sure. But cheating can be a creative process. I mean, great artists had also their kind of shortcuts while creating many memorable works of art. So I don't feel guilty using that. And here I will just tap it a bit more around the face area. Still going to get a bit darker after I glaze it. But in the meanwhile, I can keep on slightly highlighting it with the sponge. The sponge is a great tool, great for adding rust effects, or just like here, working on larger surfaces where you want some extra punch of highlight. That's more like it. And now I can still tweak it slightly around the face area. Maybe choose a slightly brighter glaze, thin it down and apply it around the nose area. And I can now repeak with brighter shade the tongue and the teeth, because these will get, if I put red right now on the tongue, it would become a bit less visible, and I want it to be strongly in contrast compared to other parts of the model. So let me use Wraithbone, which is a very good base color. And I will repeak some of those elements that will be now given different color. And now time to repick the teeth. Quite a few of them. And I want to single them out all. I may need to do it again after I'm done with the tongue. Making sure I don't just put paint on the front of the tooth, also on the sides of it. But I like working with purples in general. I've always liked, and ever since I started working with acrylic paints, because I worked with enamels back in the day, I've been fond of using those. One of the first, I mostly painted, I think, Lord of the Rings miniatures when I switched to acrylics, which was more than 15 years ago. But I did paint quite a few regiments of old Warhammer models, and those were Chaos Warriors, Slaanesh Chaos Warriors. So that's where purple is fairly prominent color. And with Neverborn you get plenty. And since it's like the middle of the stream, I'm already beginning to consider what to paint on my next stream. And I will give a poll to you guys on the word place to let you choose a model that you want me to paint next. I will just pick something from the newly released models, so, or at least models that were released sometime this year. Hello again. Good seeing you. Making some more progress on the worm. So mainly focusing on the purple body, but moving to slowly to details. So now I'll use blood red and highlight, and we'll just put some of it on the tongue. Because I want it to be distinctly visible. So there it is, blood red on the tongue, and it's already becoming much more alive. So some red on one of the teeth, that was unavoidable, I reckon. So half the tongue is ready, or more than half. And I will actually use some of the pink, mix it with some of the red, so I'll have a brighter shade, and use some of that red on the sides as well. And around the mouth, just to keep it a bit more vibrant. And also on this side. There is the red tongue. That's looking rather red, or both. So how are you celebrating your birthday? Any special plans for this wonderful day? Because this age, you should be still celebrating. I mean, I'm more than twice your age, so for me, birthdays are, yeah, fun, but not fun at the same time, because they make you aware that, yeah, the age is creeping up on you. Yeah, more purple. Just a red tongue. Other than that, it's just mainly purple. Now for the eyes, I'll start with red. Talking with friends and eating cake. Sounds like perfect birthday to me. Just having some quality time with people you like. Nothing can go wrong. Time to put some fire in the eyes, and then we'll have a large chunk of the work done, actually. I'm not going to paint the horns, probably last thing that I will do, because I keep on touching them whenever I rotate the model, and I don't want elements that I touch a lot to be painted. Sure thing. We'll hold the fort. Obliteration won't. We won't let obliteration put me in the void. Fingers crossed it doesn't happen, though it was attempted more than once. Yeah, actually, now that I read, I'm kind of feeling hungry. It's not a good thing to feel hungry when you're surrounded with paints which are not healthy. Now time for some yellow in the eyes, and which reminds me I need to buy new yellow paint, because this one is just bad. But still good enough to paint the eyes. So red base coat, yellow dot, and then white dot, and then red glaze, and nice and easy recipe for glowy eyes. Maybe I will just enhance the lips slightly on the beast with a bit of bright pink, because why not? And again, not standard brush strokes, rather movement that feels like stippling technique, where you just take a pretty loaded brush and essentially tap the surface that you want to affect. Now for the brighter part, I will use ivory color from EK range. And I need a smaller brush for that. This one should do. So just, I will maybe even grab a smaller brush for that. But for now, I'll just highlight all the teeth. And then I can give them a brown or yellowish brown glaze. I don't want them super bright. I want them toned down. There go the teeth, and now for the eyes, something a bit brighter. So a touch of white with a very light impact from yellow, and just a tiny dot on the eye, on the pupil. Got it. And the second one, almost got it. Will get it. Got it. Now let it dry. And as it dries, I can give a light wash of soft tone to the teeth. Because currently they look too healthy for a dragon or a worm or a worm. So slight hint of yellow in that brown. Okay, we're back. So Obliteration tried to kidnap me again, and guys, I actually interesting experience because now I know how the victims of 33 feel like. Right, you're just here, and then you whiff out of existence. That's gone. Not a pleasant feeling, for sure. Hopefully, no more nasty surprises like that. I just reset everything from my end, and let's hope it works. Yeah, thanks for welcoming me back. Let's hope it's going to continue. Was going to put some red ink around the eyes, and I will do it right now. All right, so applying it as always, just trying to overflow, to essentially flood it with ink, and then I will remove the excess. Hey, we're back. We're back. Seems like things are okay-ish. And welcome to the freshest follower, Wraith Painter. Nice to have you with us. Well, Obliteration promised that it was the last one, so I'm sure it meant what it said. So no more hijacking Viruk into nothingness. You have to trust the tyrant when it gives you a promise, right? There isn't any hidden costs or anything to be worried about. Is there? Yeah, swatting at the void dredge. Yeah, my cat was just playing with them. All right, seems like we're back, and back for good. This is the hope. So that's the face of this pretty worm. I may actually do a little bit more work around the nostrils because they tend to kind of blend in with the rest of the body too much, and I want them to be very much visible. So I'll give them a little bit of a frame-like highlight and maybe do the same on the eyes. So I'll mix in some magenta with off-white and use it to essentially just increase the visibility of the nostrils, just make the outline more pronounced. And that way, again, three-dimensional model looking a bit more three-dimensional. So a little bit of stippling on the lips as well. Still, I think some red on the tip of the tongue could do a world of good. And it's there. So the main part of the body is roughly complete. Now I'm just hesitating about those spikes on the back because I could paint them in bone white or bone-like structure, but at the same time there is one protruding from the back. So maybe the one protruding from the back from the metal section will be different, will be a bit like mechanical, and these will be more like bone. That's a dilemma. Actually, I think that the metallics would be not that well visible around all that purple, so I will go with Wraithbone. That's what I'll do. So Wraithbone it is. It's a very good color for building the foundation of elements that look like bone, because then I just need to highlight it with slightly brighter shade of white, and I can then start with glazing. And you know, if you have a cat in your home, flat, wherever you're, and you want to paint miniatures, you always have to be mindful of that. The cat hair just gets everywhere. And sometimes I put a picture on my Instagram and then notice that there is a cat hair stuck to that part because I wasn't just able to see it in full lighting when I was taking the picture. Now I'm just working around all those spikes. May actually do the horns now, just to have complete, let's just call it natural section of this beast. And it is a wonderful beast. I did paint an original plastic model of Peacekeeper, which is a very nice model, although it feels like it could have been even a bit bigger. Now, a few more of those hidden here. And now, time to tackle them from the other side. The other side, no pun intended. And I do have some the other side miniatures that I will eventually paint on one of those streams, mainly from the Cult of the Burning Man, because I have the starter box and some additional box, and at least one additional box. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the game eventually is back and there there is more life brought to it. I haven't played it, heard only good stuff about it from people who played it, but it's a game that I think had unfortunate timing for release due to COVID, all the delays. But hopefully, Word will be able to turn things around with the other side, because the story, the characters, it's like an extension of Malifaux, essentially. So now we get to this fun stage where I start adding more and more details. Gradually, step by step, but they are coming. Time for a bit of a larger brush to paint those horns. Maybe thin down the paint slightly, apply to water thin down layers. Always better than one that is too thick, because that way you can have more control of the process. And when I paint this way that I first tackle larger areas, some of the paint is bound to land on the areas which is not meant to be purple, but it's all fixable. Oh yeah, the new stuff. Yeah, the new faction, right? I once was it an interview with some of the word designers, or maybe maybe I just made dreamt it, but I think I heard or read somewhere that there was going to be a faction that is themed like deep East European, essentially undead Russians. That was the faction, like cavalry on undead bears. Maybe my mind is playing tricks on me, so I either heard it or wanted to hear it. But well, even if that was the plan, that now I think that releasing a faction that is Russian themed and undead themed, while it's colorful and interesting from the hobby side of things, from other unfortunate side of things, it's not the best timing for that. The Kimon, I believe, is the name of the faction that's going to be out there at some point. There was a new, it's not master, it's a commander, I believe, in the other side. It was previewed in one of Waldo's Weekly. But my hope for Waldo's Weekly, and again, I can keep on hoping, is to learn and find out more about the Castore and his keyword, the returned keyword, because based on our expert insights from Defective Dice, we learned that there was this vampiric Nephilim thing that was hiding for a lot of time, and now it's apparently making its way back into the world of Malifaux. And there are some opportunities with it. And by opportunities, I mean potential return of Lilith, And those miniatures look quite amazing. They were showcased during Gen Con. 10 Thunders at Kimon. Okay, so East Asian mythical creatures. Sounds good. Anyway, those weird does typically the design team does wonderful things. Just looking at the story, I believe that's a story keyword in Malifa. Those are they look unbelievably good. And I'm not going to switch factions. I'm not going to start playing 10 Thunders, but I think I will be painting some of those, even just to paint them and get rid of them, just for the pleasure of painting. It would be great. There was one particular that I liked. Yeah, Three Kingdoms. That's understandable. That was like a guy hanging upside down with pages floating around him. That looked kind of cool. Okay, now I think I will use yellow and I will mix it with brown for those. So I will mix these two, soft tone and zealot yellow. That way I get this dark yellow look. And yellow goes well with purple. And I will still put a bit more brown closer to the body and maybe a touch of white closer to the end of each of those spikes. And why not paint the horns like that? Seems like white that is in the artwork works well in the artwork, but on a 3D model, I want a bit more vibrancy and more color, so I'll just go with this brownish yellow. Seems to be working quite well. And yeah, the lore of Malifaux, it's like a well that has no bottom, bottomless pit from which you can drag names that appeared in past stories and bring them as characters. And Damien Ravencroft is a good example. And there is enough of foundation laid to make an interesting character that makes sense from the lore point of view and can become, well, an impactful contributor to how the world of Malifaux is shaking out. And that's just clever design. Because it's not like characters appear out of nowhere. There are brief mentions here and there. Even, I think, English Ivan was mentioned in some of the stories. Because I think some people recognized him. I mean, I read most of the fluff, most of the books, but I just didn't really study it. I just read it once, and then that was it. Now, some areas here are going to be tough to get to. But the horns are here. I will work on them a bit more with ink. So again, apologies for the noise. I'll be using hairdryer. since first edition even. Wow. How would I know? I probably read the story. But don't really remember it. Now I will tweak it a bit more. So the horns, both the horns and the spikes. Well, the more I paint it, the more I'm enjoying it. I was kind of hoping when Malifaux Burns became a thing and we knew that there were going to be new versions of Masters that were a kind of evolution of their story. I was kind of hoping for a version of Ivan that would be actually Mr. Mordrake as a master who took over and dominated Ivan's personality, because I read as far as I remember from the Explorers books, there was this hint that Ivan doesn't really like Mr. Mordrake, and the feeling seems to be mutual. So it would be kind of cool to have this different version of Mr. Mordrake who becomes a master and essentially is and then essentially Ivan becomes his totem. That would be a fun twist, but that would be pretty much like killing off a character, because not sure if there would be a way for him to become a viable, fully fledged character after such development. But still, it had a potential, at least. That's what I thought at that time. So now putting some more shade into the horns, because there is some nice texture here, and I will just go with it. So I thinned down slightly dark brown contrast paint, and I'm just using it to fill up like 2/3 of each of the recessed sections. That way, these elements will again be, well, much more visible, and to get the depth they just lose after one quick wash of light brown or dark yellow, depending how you look at it. It's a bit time consuming, but that's when you have to play something in the background like defective dice or rage quit wire or any Malifaux content, because it just seems to be making sense when you work on a hobby project to listen more about the same hobby. Although I do listen to audiobooks every now and then. The last audiobook that I listened to was uh, Wendy's Final Task, which is this trilogy by Stephen King and Richard Cheesemore. And it's actually, I believe that's the first Stephen King book that takes place in space, which was quite unusual. It's a rather short novel, but pretty good. I especially like the ending, which I'm not going to spoil, but I thought that it was nicely brought together, and it was seemed appropriate. Okay, so going into third hour of the stream with a brief interval from nasty agents of obliteration. And now I can continue working on those nice horns, just maybe give them a bit of highlight. So I will be thinning down the ivory color and just adding a dot on the most raised areas. And that way it will look more, again, more filling in the third dimension of the sculpt of the model. It's going to look absolutely amazing on the table. So my hope is that at some point there will be more of models from, let's say, Lord Galehold theme released to match the existing ones. Because right now, if let's say I want to put Hoffman on the table and use Lord Galehold, there would be those amazing dark fantasy themed models. And for the most part, the keyword is covered. But then there are some models like Howard Langston that you use with Hoffman. And if you want to use Howard Langston, you all of a sudden don't have a good option that matches the aesthetics. So who knows? Would be great to see those one day, but well, I wouldn't bet my money on that. Keeping it a bit darker, closer to the skull, and maybe a bit darker in those recessed areas here. And here. And here. And that way we have a quick and nice paint job on the horns, which are slightly yellowish. But in order to push this yellow in a bit more, I will use intensity ink, and I will use candy ink, which is super bright, and I will just use it selectively on some of the edges. So on the top here, and on the very edges over there, and on those spikes as well. This slight touch of yellow will make it work better with the purple body. And what I don't manage to finish in the stream, I will just paint offline, because my next stream will be like mid-September. And I hate to leave a project which is halfway finished for so long. I'd rather just start something new for you guys to follow. All right. So the main part of those creature elements are done. Maybe a few touches here and there. That means I can move to the mechanical parts, or maybe still some work on the underbelly. I'll just grab a dry brush one. A brush I use for dry brushing, and I will put some ivory in it and gently mix it with some of the magenta, just so that it has a slight pinkish shade. And I can give a quick dry brush to the lower belly. And that way it also becomes more three-dimensional. And then I will modify it with a few glazes. For this one, I will actually use, I'm thinking I might use Carpool Crimson. I will thin it down, of course. Now time for Carpool Crimson. I will use the base that I used before. It has some of the previous colors which are not completely dry, which is fine. And now let's grab a medium-sized brush, or maybe slightly larger one. I don't want the largest one for these glazes. So Carpool Crimson, slightly thinned down. It fills in nicely the recessed areas. It goes well with the color on the top, because it's still purple, but it's different purple, different shade. It works well and can still be slightly tweaked. Let's say it's not the end result here we're looking at. Still a few tweaks to be done. I want a hint of maybe blue. Let me just use the hairdryer, so apologies for the noise. Now as for the hint of blue, there is one color that I really, really like from the contrast range, which is Aromatic Blue. Super nice color. And again, I will use some of the lime and medium, thin it down, and use some of it, but not on the whole surface, just some sections of it. Just to give a hint of a slightly different color. Maybe even thinner than that. Maybe I will even thin it down more. It's one thing you can do with lime and medium is that once you apply the color, you can use it to kind of blend it in and spread it around. I may even tweak it slightly with some green, just to make it look a little bit more interesting. Not adding it to the whole surface, just some seemingly random spots. Now what I can do is actually use pink, mix it with white, and do a few brush strokes on the underbelly. Maybe more white to that, so that it looks more pale than pink. Now my palette looks like a complete mess, which is fine at this point. And I will just use a thinned down color to re-establish the pattern. And that way, when I spread those blue highlights, blue dots within that area, now when I paint those highlights, those slightly bluish areas just blend in with the rest of the body more naturally. So it's an interesting time of year. School is starting soon, and my younger daughter is beginning her primary school, which she's extremely excited about. She's at this innocent age where she really wants to learn, to study, to get new experiences, make new friends. And I think I was that way for a year or two, maybe three. I mean, the first years of primary school are just formative. I mean, they are formative, which is extremely important because if she's lucky and gets good teachers, that they will help her establish habits that can last a lifetime. If she's not, she will struggle. So, morning logistics with dropping one kid off to kindergarten, the other to school will become a bit more complex, but definitely I will still continue to spend my evenings painting. I mean, I even have PlayStation 5 sitting next to me on the floor, and I haven't even switched it on in like 2 months ever since I finished Elden Ring, because it just always seems to me like, yeah, gaming is cool, nothing wrong with it, fun and relaxing, but I just spend more than half of my day looking at the screen of my laptop or my other monitor. So it feels like painting at least forces me to look at something else that's not being refreshed every couple seconds. Once I go through the whole underbelly, just trying to reestablish this structure, I will grab a thinner brush and use a slightly brighter color and do the same thing, only focusing on narrower area so that we have a clear contrast between the lower body and the top. So now it's time to grab a finer brush for some fine highlights. And I apologize for making it blurred every now and then, but it's really hard for me to find the right angle where both I can see and you guys can see, but I'm doing my best. Shout at me in the chat room if I'm making it impossible for you to follow. I may still tweak it a little bit, maybe with oils, because oil paints can nicely bring together different sections. That's a consideration. I may actually do the oil paints before I finish the stream because I can do metallics separately. I mean, that's just cool. I mean, metallics are good and important part of this model, but somehow for me, just painting metallic elements is, I don't know, maybe less exciting than painting flesh parts. Because I treat the model like a canvas. That's how I approach it. And I just cannot evoke this kind of feeling in the process when I work on metallics. It just seemed to me a bit either too simple or too complicated, depending how you approach it. So I could never paint Space Marines. It's just too dull for me. I mean, nothing wrong with those miniatures. Some can be cool, but I just prefer unusual shapes, strange skin colors, misshapen, mutated, never born. That's what's really keeps me interested and involved. So that looks a bit pinkish now. I may still tweak it with a bit of very, very light purple. And I could use this Luxion purple that I used initially. And what I will do now is I will put a dot of it over here, just a small amount, and put plenty more lemon medium so that it's essentially light purple water. Well, I'm not there yet. I need it to be much lighter. And then I will give it all a glaze and use the hairdryer to speed up the process. And then I can add a little bit of more of purple closer to the part where different sections of the body meet so that it is brought together nicely. Now let's use the hairdryer. And while it's not perfectly dry, I can use some of the slightly darker color. So I will add a little bit more of base contrast to the mix so that it's more impactful. And I will just work over the area that's closer to the upper body. Maybe even more of that. And I think that the hints of blue work quite well. They keep it more complex. And sometimes it's a nice approach if you use a color that just doesn't work. So for example, adding blue while working on red. And if you add a slight touch of blue to the recessed areas, then you have this nice counterbalance, which can work very, very well. All right. Still, I can very lightly retouch those areas where I've overdone a little bit. Where this additional purple touch becomes too pronounced, I can just spread it around a little bit using white. That way there's purple below its silver. That doesn't look like a line drawn on the belly, rather something that's just naturally part of the way that the creature is, just its natural look. I mean, natural as much as you can talk about natural. Well, thank you. I hope it looks unhealthy, because that was the intention. Because then when you turn and when you see them both together, hey, hopefully they kind of work. And I can still add a little bit of touch of white to those spikes, because they became a bit too yellow in the process. And I want those to be also partially white. So this time it's just easy to give a quick touch of white. I'm glad you like it, Mike Bluff. Thank you. Thank you. It's nice of you to make this comment. All right, now let's look realistically at how much more I can do. So what I can do is start working on blocking the area for metallic, where the parts will be metal. And right now I'm thinking that adding red to those armor plates would be too much. Thank you. That was my original plan, but now I'm backing out of it, because red would be just the way when I visualize it, I just see too much color, and I want some rough, damaged looking metallic parts, because they were just scrubbing against the ground. So I will start with base coat of dark contrast brown, which would be Cygor brown. Wildwood, no, Cygor brown has excellent coverage, so I will use it to fill those gaps first. And let's start on this side. So I'll just let it in. It has very good covering and immediately impacts the area. It will lose its shine once it dries. And then I will just tweak it with silver and some brown glazes, light brown, maybe a small touch of red. Not sure yet where it will take me, but should look interesting. It's a really unusual design. I don't think I've ever seen a dragon or a worm, whatever that is, or a creature that's part mechanical, part fantasy, but it's interwoven together so nicely. So big congrats to whoever designed it. Sometimes I actually know who designed the Malifaux model, because if you follow hashtag Malifaux on Instagram, you will see some designers sharing artwork that was part of the creative process once the models are released. So I've seen at least two people, and it's always makes me feel great when I can share finished pictures of finished miniature that I know the designers of. It just makes me more appreciative of the effort that they've put into it when I have had a chance to work on the actual product. So now it's all about rotating it and holding it at sometimes awkward angles just to make sure I get to all those spots. I think if I actually paint all those, just base coat all those areas, block all those areas where the mechanical parts emerge, I'll be happy to call it a day, a night, a wrap, and finish it offline. Probably this week, maybe even by the end of the working week, if I have enough energy after hours. See, because even though I work from home most of the time, more often than from the office, and do my actual work from the same desk that's from which on which I paint, I'm just not really able to paint miniatures while at work. I mean, it would be fun to do it if I have, let's say, a slower day and not much is happening work-wise, but it's just not the kind of mindset that I can put myself in to enjoy painting. Because the mindset at work is that anything can happen anytime, and I need to be busy. I need to be ready to be busy, and that's not a state of mind that helps with the creative process. I need to be fully at ease, relaxed, typically with no background noise, no inbox open, no software running. So while it would be fun and I would be much more productive in terms of quantity, I will still continue painting after hours. Which is fine because it's a hobby. I don't want it to become part of my daily work, part of the landscape of my daily work, so to say. Yeah, that will be a interesting looking model once it's done. And I think that the metallics one should have a hint of brown because the silver, I mean, it can work with purple. So I can paint them with silver and then tweak them with some glazes of brown. Maybe consider adding some rust effect. I honestly don't know at this stage. I will need to see the whole area blocked and then visualize it and make a decision. So probably one more hour of work on this model, maybe an hour and a half, two at most. That's why I don't want to postpone it, well, to keep it uh, without any progress until next stream, because I would much rather start working on the new projects rather than showing the finishing touches, because finishing touches are all about rotating the model, moving it upside down, looking at it from different angles, making sure that I've painted all the areas that I wanted to paint and adding small tweaks, which maybe is not the best material for a stream where I want to just show my general approach and process of kind of isolating different sections of model before they are treated with brush. I mean, with proper highlights is what I meant. I think I need to switch to a slightly larger brush. So let me just clean this one, and I'll switch to a larger brush for this whole section. Yeah, larger brush it is. A much larger one, in fact. But that way I will be at least able to put base coat on this part. Maybe give it a dry brush or two before the end of the stream. And this will be the only stream of this funny half of the 5th week of September. That will be back with standard schedule of everyone painting every other week in September. So plenty of stuff to come. By the time I stream next time, maybe I will get new Euripides, and maybe that's what I will be streaming. Or I will just, I have a number of Malifaux Burns models that are either base coated or just assembled, like Hoffman the Inventor, Ivan Divil Agent, could be him, maybe Misaki Fractured, or Jim Baccara, the model that looks like it needs a surfboard. Someone needs to put him on a surfboard and paint it like he's surfing on a big wave. Needs to happen. Now this is a bit tricky because those areas are not that immediately accessible. So I need to paint it. Well, right now I'm just base coating it, so it's not that really impactful what I do. But I need to be very deliberate here, make sure I cover the whole surface and not drown it with paint, rather just give it a solid thin layer from which I can continue working. And at the same time, when I work on with such large brush and I want to get a solid coverage on large section of the model, it's just tempting to go fast. And this is where, as a painter, you should really pace yourself, because you don't want to hurry. When you hurry, you just lose the flow, the state where you feel like you're enjoying the whole activity. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure I enjoy my time rather than place too much value on the final effect. Yes, it is important. I want to be happy with the result of my work, but at the same time, I want to enjoy the process. So every now and then, if I just feel like I'm just forcing myself and pushing myself rather than enjoying the process, I just stop. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Glad you like it. And now I need to switch back to smaller brush again. Oh wow, that paint absorbed so much of the contrast paint that now I'm having a hard time really cleaning it. Good thing I have a professional brush rinser, which helps a lot with that. But I need to switch to smaller brush because some of the areas would be hard to access with the large one. Yeah, it's been a fun experience working on this giant worm. I'm sure it will be even nicer once it's fully painted. I should be able to paint it in the matter of a few days, maybe even before the weekend. Time will tell, depending on how early I start painting and how long it takes my kids to fall asleep. Or sometimes I just fall asleep while reading them in the evening, or reading something to them in the evening, which is also okay because I'm not here to meet deadlines. I'm just here to enjoy the process and share the enjoyment of the process with you guys. So there is a next tournament for me coming up on in September, which this one I will actually miss because I have some other event planned for that day. But it's great to see that there's less than a month between tournaments, and there will be 10 plus people on both. It certainly looks so, which is a good sign because I think that new gaining grounds, new releases for the and Malifaux Burn stuff, which is still new because some of those are just getting released. It kind of reinvigorated the gaming meta, and I'm glad to see some new faces at the tournaments. And even if people are fully aware that they need their time to build up the skill, I see people enjoying just enjoying playing the game, which is how Malifaux should be played, for fun, even if it's competitive. Almost done here. Oh, well, reading Malifaux lore to my kids too scary yet. I mean, my older one is 7 years old, younger one is 4.5. So a bit too early. I even was reading Harry Potter to them and stopped around book 3 because that's where the Dementors come in and it becomes really scary and nasty. So they still have time. Although they are interested, they always make comments about miniatures that I work on when they see them on my table. They are very gentle with them. They know that they have to be. But one day, maybe. Not too early. I'll just give them time. I mean, I don't think there is a standalone Marley story that would be suitable for kids without getting into all the detail. I mean, skipping some details, some nasty details could be good. Like Molly and Kirai, right? Story of best friends, BFFs, just enjoying a stroll together and visiting some places, cleaning up the mess, and just glossing over all the ghastly stuff that happens along the way. And they even have a big friend who likes ice cream. If you take it out of the context, then it's, yeah, possible. Okay, so I will be wrapping things up very shortly, but let me just pause a second and comment on the progress that's been made during the stream. I want to say 3 hour stream, but a couple minutes were taken away. Yeah, cleaning up the mess. Well, the human mess, and leaving even more mess. But yeah, I'm sure you know what you mean. You know the story very well. So the Galvanic Worm, it's a alternative peacekeeper that goes with alternative Hoffman, Lord Gale Hunt, that I painted last week and finished some bits offline. Oops. And Galvanic Worm is what I was doing for the past 3 hours. That's what I've been working on. Let's just catch some focus here. I think there are too many items and the camera is getting distracted. Okay, looks like it's back in focus. So I started with painting the upper section of the body, trying to use different shades of purple. It's still super glossy and the light reflects off of it, but essentially what I wanted was to make sure I do not paint over the wonderful texture that's already there, and that I use at least a couple of shades of purple. Then the underbelly, which was meant to be pale and somewhat purplish, and the face, the nasty, the mean looking face with red tongue, and the horns, which are brown but with a touch of yellow. And the same with those spikes on the back. Oh, and I still need to paint the nails because I missed that part. So that's something that I will need to do offline as well, because he needs them distinctly visible. So I might do that. Actually, that might be the first thing I do when I paint it offline. But for now, I'm pretty happy with the result. I also base coated the metallic elements. It's always good to look at it from different angles to notice any mistakes that can be fixed or any areas that still require some more work. And I was initially thinking of painting those plates here red, but I don't think I'll do that. I'll rather paint everything silver and then modify it with brown, maybe reddish glazes, and then still some work on the base, some static grass to be added, and that would be it. Uh, Heal the flesh with a metal plate on his lower half. Yes, it's a metal work wearing a skin suit. That's what it is, and you can see even some parts of it being torn away. I was thinking that those are just like some ornaments, but after base coating it and just giving it a glaze of purple, I realized that it's actually part of the, well, artificial skin. Now that could be a fun model to create some alternative lore. But guys, thank you all for your activity in the chat, for following. Make sure you check out other streams. Make sure you follow Word on all the social media. There is Nova coming up. We may see something for. I have no knowledge of new things being planned for Nova, but there is always hope that there might be some new miniatures that will be presented or new content. You never know with Word. They can surprise. And thank you for lovely time once again. All the best to you, McBluff. Keep on happy hobbing, painting, everyone, and see you next time. Take care, everyone.